The things that I was doing as a data scientist when I started have already kind of been replaced.
Okay.
So I think that in some ways, like the water level is rising and we're all kind of getting to higher ground, right? It's
Mhm.
more about whether your hypothesis is that like there's enough room at the higher ground or not for everybody, right? I'm optimistic. I think that these things are creating kind of net new innovation and potential in the economy.
Mhm.
I think if it's done right, this creates new jobs. They
Mhm.
aren't the same
Wow.
jobs. But
Wonderful.
again, like I'm in a role, data scientist, data architect, that
Mhm.
like my dad, who is not that old of a guy, he doesn't like he says he doesn't fully understand what I do, right? And it's not even a full generation apart. So ideally, 20 years from now, I feel the same way. And it's like I don't even recognize all these new potential opportunities for the engineers that are kind of getting started today. That would be my hope.
Okay. That's it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Intelligent Future podcast. In today's podcast, I chatted with Mr. Spencer Cook, who is a senior solution architect at Databricks. Databricks is a company that provides a platform, which is a cloud-based platform that helps enterprises build, scale, and govern data and AI. That includes generative AI and other machine learning models. I asked Spencer a lot of questions, but one of them was about what it takes to be a scientist and the typical day in a data scientist's job, which his answer here was really interesting, especially for those of you who are aspiring data scientists and you like problem solving and exploratory analysis. I asked Spencer about how AI has influenced data science and what it has helped him in speeding up the processes and the typical activities that a data scientist does. For instance, many things have now been automated by AI, things such as data cleaning, perhaps exploratory data analysis, and other things. But also the fact that companies like Databricks now provide an intelligent assistant to developers and data scientists, which could help with simple things like, for instance, if you get the name of a variable or a table wrong, and also to suggesting uh, intelligent pieces of code that help improve the quality of your code. We also talked about the future of the data science career and the opportunities and the challenges that it might have given the era of AI that we're currently witnessing. For those of you who are aspiring data scientists and others interested in the field, I hope that you will enjoy the podcast. Spencer, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Spencer, tell us a little bit and tell the audience about your journey to data science, computer science, software engineering, all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been interested in computers my whole life. I think, in the 90s, a lot of this, fantastical consumer hardware, was around, a lot of bright lights, plastics, things like that. So, I've always been intrigued by computers. I think my first real programming language was probably the like Texas Instruments, calculators, programming basic and things like that. But
Mhm.
over time, a lot of my interest started to converge around like manipulating data, sort of like almost like curation, right? And so I believe it was at my undergrad at Mizzou, I started taking some, statistical programming classes, and that sort of led to an interest in big data.
Mhm.
So I ended up doing a master's sort of in data science, but it was really in computer science, kind of focusing on the core discipline, but then some of these emerging trends around machine learning, big data, analytical processing, et cetera. And that sort of led to my, current career as a data architect.
Wonderful, fantastic. And if you could describe a typical day of your job as a data architect and as a data scientist.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most appealing part of it is that no day is really the same.
Mhm.
So out of the last 4 weeks, I've been traveling to different cities for 3 out of the four of them. It's not all life on the road, but you get opportunities to go see people, be face to face. Especially right now is sort of conference season for a lot of things. So
Mhm.
it's exciting, but really the theme, like what ties all the days together, is that I'm working on a lot of diverse projects in enterprise financial services
Mhm.
that are all related to basically these problems related to innovating around AI systems, managing larger and larger, volumes of data, change all the four V's, right?
Wonderful.
So yeah, so it's a lot of talking, a lot of architecting, and a decent amount of traveling.
Fantastic. Before we get into these technical things, which I'm sure a lot
Yeah,
of
sure.
be interested in. You said that in your typical, well, you said there's no typical day, but you said that you also meet with people during your job because a lot of people would think that a data scientist or a software architect is someone who mainly sits in their office and, just do things on their own without
Hmm.
really interacting with people so much or with the clients so much. So tell us a little bit about that before we dive into the technicalities and
Totally.
how AI is transforming your job.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think every role is different, even where I work at Databricks. But, typically with bigger enterprise problems, a lot of what you're architecting around isn't really like one design. You're kind of solving for maybe 10 or 100 potential downstream problems simultaneously. And so one of the things I found is once I kind of go into the R&D lab and architect a solution like you were talking about, which does often happen, after hours, very different, not face to face. I
Mhm.
need to kind of go evangelize that solution or that point of view kind
Mhm.
of within the
Wonderful.
company, or what I've been doing recently is even within the industry with certain ideas. And
Mhm.
that oftentimes is best done face to face and
Mhm.
especially top down. And what I mean by that is kind of meeting with other people that are in a leadership position or position of influence,
Mhm.
spending time with them, helping them understand your ideas, and then the things kind of trickle down. I feel like for really kind of meaningful, cutting edge ideas, that's often necessary.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, so communication skills are key for your job, and I guess for a data scientist job in general, because not only are you
Totally.
communicating facts or the truth via the data, but also you have to communicate, I guess, your solution, your model to individuals, to humans. Wonderful. So obviously, this podcast is about AI. So AI is coming soon
Yeah.
in our episode. But I'm sure some of the audience that's listening to us are undergraduate students who would like to perhaps follow your career path. So if we can give them a little like glimpse of what it takes to be a data scientist, just very quickly. I mean, obviously you have to take
Yeah.
the foundational courses, the math courses, the data structures courses, these
Yeah.
foundational computer science. But what else does it take for someone to become a data scientist?
Yeah, I think that there have to be
Mhm.
classes of problems that you're naturally drawn to solving. To
Mhm.
your point, it doesn't have to be like, you're doing math Olympiad, right? You don't necessarily have to be hacking on your own computer on the weekends, but there should ideally be something.
Hmm.
where you have a relationship between problem solving and
Hmm.
getting some sort of reward mechanism back from that. Because essentially, what data science is
Hmm.
very similar to any science discipline, it's this sort of feedback loop of, developing hypotheses, investigating them, communicating back the results, using that to restart the cycle. So if you don't have a natural draw to that in some sort of area, it's going to be hard to really engage with data science. So find what that is, kind of curate it naturally, find hobbies around that area. For me, I was lucky and that was computers, right? So it's just like a pretty perfect fit, but that would be my, big thing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Spencer. All right, let's dive into AI and
Hmm.
the recent revolution of large language models, AI tools, and
Yeah,
individuals as well as companies are embracing AI. So, if you can tell us a little bit at Databricks, but also at your role specifically, how
sure.
AI is transforming everything.
Oh man, yeah. So I feel like I've kind of been at a really transformational period of time in both the industry and for Databricks.
Mhm.
Um, AI at Databricks has become one of the kind of horizontal technologies on our platform.
Mhm.
We have it's like software terminology, but we have horizontal tools like we have a SQL editor, we have data science notebooks, but then we have horizontal capabilities like data governance or data storage, right? That kind of support all the different use cases you might have.
Mhm.
AI is obviously one that is horizontal, transformational, and it's kind of moved to a very critical part of the stack. So
Mhm.
at Databricks, we see ourselves in sort of the picks and shovel space,
Mhm.
where we aren't necessarily trying to chase every, gold mine or be involved in, every situation, right? But we basically want to support the people doing that work, pursuing those trends. And so we've, I think, built a platform that is built for that kind of era, and it took a lot of work and a lot of transformation. And
Mhm.
then in my specific role, like you mentioned, I do a lot of communication, knowledge management, things like that in my day-to-day world. And so I use LLMs, chatbots. I use a lot of Perplexity and Databricks to basically augment that communication work.
Mhm.
And then for research, it's, critical because you can basically summarize these massive volumes of text and kind of process more information than you normally could. Like I remember a lot of my, surveys in graduate school were trying to find the important kernels of information. And now you can spend kind of all your time reviewing the kernels and, skipping past the bulk
Mhm.
of the text.
Wonderful. So AI or LLMs are helping you mainly with summarizing massive amounts of data. Is it also helping with the processes that data scientists have to go through, like for instance,
Definitely.
cleansing the data? Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, and so I kind of separated it because the latter category I feel like are things that I'm kind of creatively using tools to go do on my own. And it kind of feels abstract. But then the first category, those are things that Databricks is kind of building into the platform. So I almost take it for granted as like things I'm doing because it's just so automatic now. But to be detailed in Databricks, we basically have an assistant that's in a sidebar constantly there for you. What's
Wonderful.
very different about Databricks is that this is in a data platform. So it
Mhm.
has a lot of information about what you might be trying to do in, say, a data science notebook that a traditional, Copilot or a ChatGPT type system might not. So a simple example is if you fumble, the name of your table,
Mhm.
we kind of know your metadata so we can fix it, right?
Mhm.
If one of your peers has already written, training code for a model on this same data set, our ghost text might pull out, that same code that your peer has already written, because again, it's in the same platform,
Wonderful.
connected to the same data object, so we can say this is how other people have been using it.
Okay,
So it's a
so
lot different
learning
than
from the
just
entire
scraping GitHub.
institution. Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. And when I'm working primarily with regulated industries,
Mhm.
so not only does that give them comfort that like this isn't copyrighted or this isn't potentially coming from some unknown source, like it's kind of from their code base. But
Mhm.
for me, it's kind of nice knowing that there's a closed loop and I'm able to like use
Mhm.
these AI systems freely working on, questions about my customers and kind of sensitive topics without worrying about, data leakage,
Mhm.
retraining, things like that.
Wonderful, fantastic, fantastic. Okay, I want to expand on because this is something I've been doing my homework on prior to
Hmm,
this podcast, which is what Databricks has invented, the concept of
sure.
data lakehouse. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously it's sort of a portmanteau between the data lake storage architecture and
Mhm.
then the data warehouse architecture. What
Mhm.
was really interesting is, whenever I was in graduate school, a lot of these things were kind of emerging or being developed. So
Mhm.
there were the first cloud warehouses, and then
Mhm.
there were also like Google Cloud Storage based off the Hadoop file
Sure.
system.
Yes.
And basically, both were offering the potential to manage, previously unheard of volumes of data.
Mhm.
Netflix at the time is doing big competitions just to see like who can even build a recommendation model on, I believe it was
Sure.
100 terabytes of data at the time, or like 1 petabyte, nothing even that controversial in kind of today's context.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so basically what Databricks was doing at the time, our, founders were still at Berkeley doing research. They were
Mhm.
behind kind of a natural successor to the Hadoop ecosystem, the MapReduce technologies. And what it basically did, it was called Spark. And what
Mhm.
it basically did was brought a much simpler programming interface to the Hadoop side of
Correct.
the world. So
Yes.
all the compute is now kind of much faster. The industry all kind of converges on Spark. A company emerges, but what everyone kind of realizes, especially people that are data veterans at the railroads and all these big kind of industrial concerns, is that it still doesn't address some of the needs of data warehouses like
Mhm.
consistency, reliability, ACID
Yeah,
transactions,
yeah,
as
yeah.
we call them. Okay.
Mhm.
And so
For
basically,
structured
for
databases.
structured transactional processing.
Mhm.
So the analytical storage, it can answer big questions really fast, but
Mhm.
basic stuff like how many employees do I have, you might still get, a different answer when you hit the query, 5 seconds apart, right? And
Mhm.
it depends on, things like partitioning and, CAP theorem and all this stuff. Hopefully the undergrad students are kind of,
Yes,
off doing
they should be
Wikipedia
aware of
right
those
now,
things.
right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
But all these things basically Databricks kept the point of view of, okay, we're going to keep innovating on this kind of lake paradigm,
Mhm.
keep solving problems, keep solving problems. And so one of the problems that they solved was with their second open source technology called Delta Lake. And that aimed to bring ACID transactions to tables on a Hadoop style data lake. So
Mhm.
now all of a sudden you have the distributed big data processing engine, and then you also have data lake ACID style warehouse transactions. So you have Lake House, and
Mhm.
that kind of led to this new
Wonderful.
technology stack.
Wonderful.
And so at this time, I was in consulting, and it really was one of those like when that blog came out, it was like, oh man, you've got to come read this kind of a thing. You could kind of feel the industry shaking up a little bit. So I've been kind of chasing it from the inception.
Wonderful. So, obviously, this is going to be too technical for the audience, but if you can
Sure.
simply explain it in a way, because structured databases and massive amounts of raw data, they are separate, they're very different, right? in terms of the requirements, in terms of the speed of processing, in terms of maintenance. So how were they able to combine the features of these two worlds together? Uh,
Yeah.
if you can share some tips of the kernel that they built without getting extremely technical.
Yeah, I get the privilege of getting to explain this to like CFOs and,
Okay.
many like
Wonderful.
business focused people. So I'll
Wonderful.
try and, lean into that.
Hmm.
So essentially, there's kind of two basic things that you need to account for to make this work on data lakes.
Hmm.
So you need some way of managing transactions.
Hmm.
And typically, what happened in the past was that transaction volume itself would become another big data problem to solve. So we're
Hmm.
kind of back in square one. Well,
Hmm.
like I mentioned at Databricks, we already had a really solid, scalable big data processing framework. So
Hmm.
basically, what we did is we used that tool, Spark, to also process the transaction logs. So
Hmm.
basically, we were able to use something we had already invented to
Wonderful.
solve the second problem. And so now you have scalable transactions on a cheap data lake. And so, it's really allowed you to get these massive volumes of data at a cheap price while still having performance that you might need for things like real-time streaming.
Wonderful. Well, this is definitely transformational. All right, fantastic. I'm going
Hmm.
to switch gears a little bit, and I want to challenge you a little bit. So, with your job now
Sure,
as a data scientist, I'm hearing from some experts here and there. They're saying that the job of a software engineer is going to be no more very soon in the future.
sure.
Also, the job of a data scientist is going to be replaced by AI and so on and so forth. So, what's your feeling about that? Is that really happening, or no? It's gonna require a lot of time before this happens.
The things that I was doing as a data scientist when I started have already kind of been replaced.
Okay.
So I think that in some ways, like the water level is rising and we're all kind of getting to higher ground, right? It's
Mhm.
more about whether your hypothesis is that like there's enough room at the higher ground or not for everybody, right? I'm optimistic. I think that these things are creating kind of net new innovation and potential in the economy.
Mhm.
I think if it's done right, this creates new jobs. They
Mhm.
aren't the same
Wonderful.
jobs. But
Wonderful.
again, like I'm in a role, data scientist, data architect, that
Mhm.
like my dad, who is not that old of a guy, he doesn't like he says he doesn't fully understand what I do, right? And it's not even a full generation apart. So ideally, 20 years from now, I feel the same way. And it's like I don't even recognize all these new potential opportunities for the engineers that are kind of getting started today. That would be my hope.
Okay, that's extremely hopeful. But in order for you to get to where you are, you went through some training and you probably
Yeah.
self-taught yourself a lot of things on the way.
And that's what kind of concerns me is like you don't know when things are like a bicycle that kind of helps augment your natural like body, and just takes you further. It's still kind of exercise, right? But you can do more of it for longer periods of time
Mhm.
versus when it's like an e-bike or just like, a car, a golf cart, and now we're like kind of fully sedentary and kind of losing, some of that essence. So I worry about the same things. That's part of why I was saying earlier, like if you have a hobby you're naturally drawn to,
Mhm. Oh,
I
okay.
think it could be easier to find yourself doing those things kind of organically and
Mhm.
not just like trying to do shortcuts all the time. So like whatever helps you still get those skills.
Wonderful. So basically, the advice to anyone who's an aspiring data scientist is to just make sure that you really love the stuff before you dedicate a lot of time for this kind of career.
Some sort of problem solving. And like I've known people that came from public speaking backgrounds. I know people that, came from anthropology. It's not just problems in kind of STEM or computer science, but you have to kind of love that loop. Um,
Mhm.
because we need people that are kind of feeding the LLMs as well and
Mhm.
acting as the humans in the loop
Mhm.
because they are like a crucial counterbalance to getting productive, value out of these systems.
I'm so happy that you brought up human in the loop. That's actually part of
Yeah,
the research I do, because I
great.
do a lot of research on conversational agents and how they are influencing the behavior of people. So tell us a little bit about the importance of that in your job and your role, the fact that we still need humans in the loop.
Yeah, I mean, so if you want to just like think of an analogy,
Mhm.
a normal one-shot prompt, we're kind of just like throwing a bowling ball. It's going to go the direction that we initially orient it.
Mhm.
The human in the loop system can kind of allow us to have like bumpers or kind of points of contact further down the lane to
Mhm.
help get the ball kind of in the direction we're hoping for, right? So we've seen things like O1 and other chain of thought systems kind of put in more guardrails or even like, iterate on your prompts in real time. But it's all kind of with the aims of getting the ball kind of back headed towards where, the human wanted it to go in the first place.
Fantastic. All right, thank you. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about your recent collaboration with MasterCard
Yeah,
and
sure.
MasterCard's AI assistant. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I get to work with a lot of different great institutions, MasterCard among them.
Mhm.
Uh Databricks was at a conference Money 2020 recently, and we did a presentation with MasterCard, and I got a chance to, see this announcement. Essentially, MasterCard is working with Databricks to create some chatbot assistant type capabilities
Mhm.
that are trying to add the value I alluded to earlier, where they're, grounded in the data that's coming from MasterCard. They're providing, positive, more reliable customer experiences. So it was, great to kind of have a front row view to that and, all these trends in the industry that were converging at Money 2020.
Mhm. Wonderful. And the creation of that digital assistant or chatbot, so Databricks created it and it was trained on MasterCard's data. Was there
The way
testing?
I would put it is so essentially Databricks is like a data operating system in the cloud.
Mhm.
MasterCard built this soup to nuts using the Databricks sort of data operating system, if you will. So, th concepts like Lakehouse, a lot of the Databricks technologies around, AI hosting and evaluation, those, were all components here. But I think the, press release and some of the talks that MasterCard have given around it have a lot of, really great detail on the specifics.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. So you think like solutions like these, chatbots that could, I want to say, capitalize on the data wealth that Databricks and companies similar to Databricks has, could potentially be useful for, what types of companies? Companies like MasterCard, customer services, if you could
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so our goal is to have it essentially be something like, Excel is a little bit bold, but something where anyone that works with data,
Mhm.
kind of has it on their bookmarks bar.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I think a lot of our financial institutions are already appreciating is that they're able to have experiences that are more for front desk analysts.
Mhm.
Like we have a tool called Genie that's essentially just purely natural language Databricks. So I could, present it to you. You think, oh, this is a nice Databricks skinned version of ChatGPT, whatever. It's
Uh-huh.
very natural. But
Yeah.
behind the scenes, it has all of the kind of human reinforcement I alluded to earlier. So we've put instructions in it. We've connected it to, your governance rules and, all the different kind of enterprise things you want from a data management platform, but kind of democratized with a UI that's familiar to anyone.
Wonderful.
So
So in the past, when data science became a thing, I can't remember when that exactly happened, maybe 11 years ago, 12 years ago.
yeah, like 2012, 2013, I feel like
Wonderful.
was kind of the boon.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So the skills that a data scientist needed at that time, obviously some computer science skills, some programming skills, some statistical analysis skills, and also the combination and the data science skills, being able to cleanse the data set, being able to analyze the data set, get insights from it. I think some information visualization skills and so on and so. Obviously, it has transformed so much, as you just told me. Your role has massively changed. But those foundational basic data science skills now, have they been replaced by AI? Like, for instance, someone like me, I'm not a data scientist. I can do statistical analysis because I'm a researcher. Um, do you think with the help of AI, I can be let's say like an intro level data scientist, for instance? Or is it a little bit more?
Yeah. Got it. Got it. No, I think it's a great question. So, like, if you think about, like a chef, right? Like, if you kind of own your own restaurant and it's a one person operation, you aren't really cooking so much as you're doing ingredient prep. Like, a lot of your time, if you kind of looked at it on a time
Uh,
card, it's like cutting up stuff, putting it in bowls,
okay.
marking it with dates, all these different things. As you get staff, they kind of augment those things so you do more actual cooking and you make more dishes with your time during the day and spend less time cutting up carrots or whatever. I think AI ends up serving the same role for me, and I think for a lot of other data scientists,
Mhm.
where I have the AI do my exploratory data analysis in the sense that it's doing the ingredient prep, it's coding, it's cutting up the data and, presenting it out to me, but I still have to do kind of the executive decision making
Wonderful.
of reviewing the results, etc. So it kind of puts your chef skills in higher focus and requires you to do more of your actual core capabilities because you're scaling up and augmenting kind of the menial tasks. So some people aren't ready for that. Like some people kind of thrive in the sort of mundane, sort of there's a freedom in that, but
Yeah, and maybe especially if you are you let's say like an intro level, like a beginner,
mhm.
someone who just started to become a data scientist, I think they need to learn these basic skills. But if they rely on AI tools, they may not learn it. I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the things that I hope that they're teaching in some of the fundamentals courses is kind of the difference between generative models and predictive models and like
Mhm.
kind of the value in both.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of things where you might have someone putting say a corpus of data through a transformer model when
Mhm.
it's like what if we just plotted it against a linear model like
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
there's a lot of value still left in the basics, so I kind of harp on that a lot in the industry.
Mhm. Wonderful. Okay, so we're getting closer to the end of this podcast. Your
Sure.
insights were extremely valuable. Are you hopeful about the future? You feel like the role of a data scientist will continue to evolve, and this is a promising career for the youngsters. And what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I've seen more kind of executive excitement and people in positions of influence kind of talking about data and AI than
Mhm.
I've seen at any other previous point in my
Mhm.
career.
Mhm.
So I think there is inevitably some amount of a bubble to this.
Mhm.
Like, I think spending the energy to, boil a gallon of water every time someone wants like a recipe for spaghetti and meatballs, like, I
Mhm.
think we're going to settle on maybe a more efficient kind of infrastructure and like use cases for this.
Mhm.
But we're kind of in like the, 2002 phase of the internet. And I
Mhm.
think if we look at the 22 years after that, there's
Mhm.
been ups and there's been downs, but like
Right.
in general, big plus for all sorts of really positive, humanitarian causes, all sorts of things. So I'm hoping that as we kind of dilute down to the core of like where the value statement is for AI, where it fits, where it doesn't, we can kind of, reap the same benefits.
Wonderful. Okay, one last thing. We
Yeah.
didn't talk too much about the ethical side of things. Uh,
Yeah.
how do you feel AI and the integration of it into data science right now can be a force for good when it comes to ethics? Things like bias, things like, fighting against bias in data, fighting against privacy violations
Yeah.
and things of that nature.
Yeah, so this is like it's outside of financial services, but an example that immediately springs to mind is in our sort of entertainment vertical. We work with a lot of video game companies,
Mhm.
and they run, toxicity models for the online chat through
Mhm.
Databricks oftentimes. And
Mhm.
so we've seen huge, like generational improvements to detection
Mhm.
of, hate speech and things like that through the use of
Wonderful.
large language models, because these are things that like programmers just can't fight against it. Like, they were
No.
trying to write all these detection algorithms, whatever, but
Mhm.
large language models are a perfect fit for this kind of like emerging,
Mhm.
text-based content. And so they've, I think, already done a lot to, make it safer for, potentially kids playing Fortnite, things like that.
Mhm. Mhm. Fantastic. So basically, the reason why that is it because LLMs have been trained on massive amounts of data sets that teach the LLMs like what is a bias in the data or what could be toxic, as you just said, or what could pass as hate speech. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, essentially, it has to do with like I believe the attention algorithm
Mhm.
component of transformer architecture, but
Mhm.
it basically makes it so that we can catch a little bit more nuance. Like English language is so context based.
Correct.
And so if I have like a whole sentence that's meant to be hateful, that's harder to catch than like a couple of, words, our,
Yeah.
famous
Yeah.
four-letter words, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these LLMs are better at kind of detecting context or detecting repeated use, things like that.
Mhm. Mhm. Fantastic. All right. Wonderful.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
Spencer.
not the use case I spend a lot of time with, but it's I think across the board, we're seeing a lot of things like that.
Mhm. Mhm. This has definitely been educational for me. I learned a lot from you. In fact, I am involved with a psychologist about checking whether LLMs can help in fighting against toxicity. Because, as
Oh,
you know,
that's
online
amazing.
content is, some of it can be toxic, especially to kids and minors. So we want to check how LLMs can fight against that. So that's something that we're looking at. But I'm not looking at this from the angle of the algorithm itself or what LLMs exactly
Sure.
do. I'm looking at it as a black box and see how it can detect toxicity. So we were working on something called toxicity score as well for text. And so I mean it's amazing what kids can be subjected to these
Mm.
days.
It's really eye-opening. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Spencer, it's been really fun talking to you. Wishing you all the best.
Absolutely.
And yeah, let's stay in touch.
Cheers. Yeah, thanks, Dr. Kuhil. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Have a good day and nice
Thank you.
evening for me. Thank you
Yeah,
very
yeah, absolutely.
much.
Cheers. Thanks.
Let's
Talk to you soon.